Namaste. So, as we know, it is Christmas time, and we like to see things in Mother and Sri Aurobindo's light. It gives us a completely new perspective to understand what we normally just continue doing in the mechanical stream of things. So, how did they look at Christ and Christianity? Uh, if you see through the different, it's a whole lot of writings. But one of the things that comes clear is that Sri Aurobindo did see Christ as a partial manifestation of the divine in the scheme of avatars. That part is very clear. It comes in different places, it comes in his aphorisms, it comes in Essays on the Gita, where he discusses the doctrine of avatarhood. And it is there in Mother's writings, but the Mother says something very interesting. She says that she actually didn't believe in the story. It is only because when Sri Aurobindo said that he was a partial manifestation of the divine that she accepted. So that is something very interesting about the way Mother puts it. But first we go back to what really happens when a divine being comes. So there is the divine personality. We have Buddha, Sri Krishna, Christ, and of course there are other great beings who have stood as the high point of humanity to show a way. The avatar opens the way, and there are vibhutis, there are prophets, there are seers, they show the way upwards. And then humanity is supposed to follow. But it's difficult because they show a way and they give a law. And while humanity professes it, it's something very beautiful. Something in the human consciousness acknowledges it, but the rest of the part is not able to walk the whole path. There are so many stories about so many prophets. Christ himself told a story which was one of my favorites when I had read the New Testament, that as he was going through the fields, some of his disciples asked him, "You are speaking so many beautiful things, but don't you think you are wasting your efforts? You are throwing pearls who have no value about it." And then he seems to have remarked that I am like a farmer who is spreading seeds everywhere, and where the soil is ready, one or two seed will take root. But most human soil is hard, and so nothing takes root there. And then there is another kind of soil in human nature which is very soft. Again, nothing takes root there. Because to tread the spiritual path, one has to avoid both the extremes. Neither like those anchorites, even in Christian mysticism, a side came up of harsh asceticism, which we see even now. There are monasteries which are, too much built or centered around a kind of very strict and stern following. And the Mother doesn't speak very well about that. She says that's not the way humanity advances. That's not the message of Christ. Well, that's one extreme. There is the other extreme where humanity tends to completely reject or pays a lip service, and what it does in practice is just the opposite. So these are the true extremes that human beings take, whereas Christ speaks about a path where on one side you need firmness, but it should not be so hard that nothing takes root. Why? Because spiritual consciousness is a vast consciousness. It requires vastness, it requires plasticity, because divine will doesn't act like a rigid dogma. And hard natures turn it into a rigid dogma. And that's when we see religions are born. Religions in their outer form as we understand it today. On the other hand, there are soils which are very soft, where you readily accept and you're very happy about something new which has come, but actually you're not able to walk the path because there is lack of that firm steadfastness of will, lack of core sincerity. But one odd person, he says that out of thousands, one odd person has the right combination and it takes root. But even then, as it grows, there are animals which can eat away the plant which is being formed. And then finally, one out of maybe 10,000s will eventually grow into a tree. And he says, that's enough recompense for what I am doing. So it reminds us of, there are plenty of stories like that. This is the story of Guru Nanak Dev, who went as far back, as far up to almost Iraq, modern Iraq, definitely way beyond Afghanistan, along with only one disciple who accompanied him right throughout. And eventually he also died, and then he seems to have turned back and came back. But they went very far to spread a light, but well, nothing much happened. And what happens subsequently is turned into a kind of a religion which loses its real value. So they come and show the way, but how humanity deals with an ideal, Sri Aurobindo says it pays a lip service and uses it as an excuse to do things which are almost diametrically opposite. This is how Sri Aurobindo says that they join the bandwagon, and by joining they corrupt the foil and spoil it. This is one of the ways that the asura of falsehood works. The mother has used this term repeatedly, how religions are formed. They start with the divine being who had a beautiful experience. But subsequently, who takes over when they leave the throne? I mean, the throne is their throne in the human heart, so that they do not leave. But when they leave the earthly life, then that space is rushed upon by the asura to seize it and occupy that throne. And that's when he begins to throw canticles and take into its net, not a very good thing to think about, many beings who out of their simplicity, sometimes out of their, whatever way they connect, and then they are caught in that net, and a whole religious ideology is formed which is used by social and political forces for expanding their empire. So that's how, if we really look at it, conversions began, because one of the things with conversion was a purely political purpose. It had nothing spiritual about it. Spiritual conversions are always spontaneous. They have to be an inner contact with the divine being, and then you feel that this is the path I must follow. Like it happened to Saul of Tarsus, how he turned to Christ, because he was persecuting the Christians, and on the battlefield when he fell, he had a manifestation or an apparition of Christ, and he was converted. Now that is how true conversions take place. But other conversions are for purely political purposes, because if those whom you are conquering and capturing, they are indoctrinated into the same belief system as the conqueror is or the invader is, then it becomes very easy. It becomes easy to justify, it becomes easy to take the masses on your side, because religion can be a very strong force to bring people together, even sometimes stronger than culture. Because, that's what happened in certain contexts, especially in India, where so many invasions took place. Now, culture is very similar right through the length and breadth of the country. But people get, when they take to a certain religion, they feel much more bonded with those who have religious affiliations, far off, than the cultural roots in which they grow. It's a very strange problem that right now nature is going through in the formation of the nation unit. And so the method it seems to have adopted is to break religions and bring out the kernel of spirituality. That's why Mother says the age of religion is over. The second tendency of religion is that it tends to lose the central core issue, core teaching, and it turns things into a rigid dogmas. And when things are turned into a rigid dogma, it loses its value and significance. Because, take for example, Christ came to preach freedom. He came to give compassion, the law of compassion. If you look at the context in which he enters, there is Judaism, and there is that a kind of very, almost a harsh religious tendency of, it's a strong moral righteousness. If you really look at that age. And he comes to teach the law of compassion, which has to replace the law of Moses. He is, in that context, he was upgrading the religion in which he was born. He was a great social reformer, apart from being a spiritual figure. And he also he preached the ideal of equality, fraternity, and freedom, which paradoxically, much later, you see that people who spoke about it had discarded Christianity, which is very strange. But the teaching of Christ took shape through those who had outwardly discarded Christianity. Many of these people were, apart from Joan of Arc and few others at that point of time, subsequently in France, when later on the Renaissance took place, these were people who outwardly discarded the religion of Christianity, but inwardly they were actually making effort to manifest the teaching of Christ, which was freedom, equality, and fraternity. So the ways of the divine are not so easy to bracket into this way or that way. As the mother says, there are people who are practicing yoga, but they don't know about it. They don't use the term. Whereas there are others who use the term. Nowadays there is a new term, integral yogi, which I don't know, integral psychology, integral health, everything. None of which actually Sri Aurobindo used. So now we have also integral yogi, whatever it means. But they are on the path of integral yoga. They don't use the word psychic being, because they have probably not read about it. But they do say that love for truth, love for beauty, love for good. So when you look at what the psychic being does to man is, initially he brings this love for truth, love for beauty, love for good, which may take many forms. It need not always take a religious form. So Sri Aurobindo says that strangely the avatars belong to the secular line of humanity, human progress. They actually don't come to establish a religion. They come to carry the march of mankind one step forward by opening a way. And that way, if we look at in its depth, is very universal. Christ did not say that, only some of my faithful followers, nor did Krishna say. When we see who Krishna is in the Gita and the path that he has given, anybody, anywhere can practice it. It just requires that aspiration or the urge that Arjuna had, that I want to know what to do, how to choose, how to make my choices, how to make action meaningful, purposeful, and uplift it to the divine, highest possible scope of action. If you look at it, Gita from that angle, it teaches man how to uplift action to its utmost. So, this is where we see the mother says Christ brought compassion. Buddha also brought compassion. And Sri Aurobindo even says that it was the teaching of Buddha which found its way into the West through the lips of Christ. There is so much similarity. Now, another aspect which they say very beautifully, that a lot of discussion goes on the historicity. So, historicity of Christ, historicity of Krishna. It is not really the important aspect. Because historicity may be okay for those who want to, a faithful few of a certain kind. But it is not that which is the core of the teaching. One may live in Vrindavan for ages, and yet one may not cultivate true bhakti. One may live even in Sri Aurobindo ashram for that matter, and yet be far from the divine. Mother and Sri Aurobindo have so many times reminded us of that. So, it's not about the historicity. It is the idea force that he has released, and the human heart which the divine as an avatar takes as his habitat, and it becomes his permanent habitat. So even when he leaves the earthly scene, he leaves a stamp, he leaves an influence, he gives a gospel. Every avatar gives some kind of a gospel for mankind to follow, a law if you like, and he does create a sangha. That's true. He creates a kind of collective life around the central personality of the teacher. Now, over a period of time, it is this life which has a tendency either in the, in its aggressive, expansionist, ambitious mode of conversion, taking more and more people into the fold, or as I said, more commonly for socio-political purposes, that it changes into a religion as we receive it today. So it's very important to distinguish between, let's put it this way, Christ and Christianity. They are not synonymous. It's equally important to distinguish between Muhammad and Mohammedanism, or Islam as we understand it. It is equally important to distinguish between Krishna and the sects and cults that have sprung up around him. it is important to distinguish between Buddha and all the multiple Buddhist sects. Mahayana, Hinayan, Theravada, all of them contain a truth, but often it is surrounded and covered by much that is untruth. I won't use the word falsehood, but untruth. So it's so important to take out that kernel of truth. And the mother says that those who are marked for spiritual life, who are sincere in their aspiration, it doesn't matter what religion they belong to, they will find that core and they will advance. It is not because of the religion, she puts it a little humorously, but in spite of it. So that's because they are sincere seekers and aspirants. But it should be important because in today's time they are considered as synonymous, which creates a lot of confusion. And every religion must understand, look within itself and see where is the spiritual core. And if religions can find the spiritual core, actually very soon humanity will progress. All the divisions, all the hatred, this tendency of one-upmanship, tendency to divide people along religious lines, all this will automatically vanish. So this is one of the means through which humanity will advance. So I'm going to read a little passage. Here, the mother is asked the question, what is exactly the nature of religion? Is it an obstacle in the way of the spiritual life? The mother said, the age of religions is over. So we have to read it in that context. At one point of time, it had its purpose. Over a period of time, as I said, so much dirt gathers around that little sparkling diamond at the core that it's almost impossible to dig and find it. And then you can dig and find it irrespective of religion. So that's where she starts revealing to us, religion belongs to the higher mind of humanity. It is the effort of man's higher mind to approach, as far as lies in its power, something beyond it. So higher mind of humanity is just a step above the rational mind. The rational mind does not believe in anything higher than the evidence of the senses. But religion is able to, the higher mind is able to see in life symbols or some kind of a manifestation of divinity in some way or the other. So that is where it sees something beyond it, something to which humanity gives the name God or spirit or truth or faith or knowledge or the infinite, some kind of absolute, which the human mind cannot reach and yet tries to reach. So there is a kind of glimpse at the higher mind that no, reason is not everything, the evidence of the senses is not everything. There is a greater truth which is beyond. So to that extent, it starts with an edge over material science. Because material science traps us as it stands today. It's going to expand its inquiry and eventually it will also lead us through the vital maze and the mental haze towards the sense of truth. Its approach is different. But religion takes its stand on the higher mind, which is already a step higher. Religion may be divine in its ultimate origin. In its actual nature, it is not divine but human. And she is very kind here. Later on, she speaks of specific religions. She says that the Asura is occupying its throne. And we see in Savitri, we have a line, a very interesting line where Sri Aurobindo writes, religion sat on a blood-stained throne. So we should be very careful whether our allegiance is to the divine and the core personality, which is the avatar, or the institution and the religion or the ideas that begin to form around. The divine personality always stands. The eternal avatar will always be there as a gate. But that which forms around him is to that the mother is reminding us. For the religions made by man are many. In truth, we should speak rather of religions rather than of religion. For the religions made by man are many. These different religions, even when they had not the same origin, have most of them been made in the same way. Now she gives some example. We know how the Christian religion came into existence. It was certainly not Jesus who made what is known as Christianity. Mother cautions this even about Sri Aurobindo. He says there will be a tendency to turn it into religion. But the truth is so vast that you can't do it. And perhaps that is one reason among many that for the first time we see that a divine being avatar, yogi of yogis, has not just left things by the spoken word, because spoken word, after a couple of centuries, people try to put in place and many things get mixed up and we don't know what was really spoken. But in one way, thanks to the service offered by material science, that Sri Aurobindo could directly write on the typewriter, and we have mother's voice recorded. So first time we see that there is no ambiguity left. So there is nothing about teaching being interpreted. There is a direct expression of Sri Aurobindo and the mother right on paper, and it is available now. I think it is one of the biggest gifts that the avatars have left. So this is something unparalleled, which of course we have spoken several times. It was not Jesus who made what is known as Christianity, but some learned and very clever men. Mother has a wonderful sense of humor. Sri Aurobindo said she has a subtle sense of humor. People would not often understand the sense of humor. But some learned and very clever men put their heads together and built it up into the thing we see. So this is what we see today. And then clever men lure, like that spider lures people. So by fear and favor, these are the two mechanisms used by religions to draw adherents. And it's like the more the merrier. And Sri Aurobindo we know that he was not keen on numbers. It was the quality. And if they are genuine people, each of them is worth a lakh. That's what is meant by original teaching of the Sikh gurus, that one Sikh is equal to sawa lakh, 1.25 lakh. But it has been converted again into number game. That's a different thing. It means one person who is sincerely pursuing the path of yoga is much more important than 100,000 well-known men or all kinds of humanity. That's what all teachers have said. But here, she reminds us how it is formed cleverly. There was nothing divine in the way in which it was formed. And there is nothing divine either in the way in which it functions. So she is speaking particularly of the Christian context, that there is nothing divine in the way it was formed. Now there is a lot of material over this. A lot of people have given talks, how it came into existence, how Islam came into existence as we understand it today. So it's time that humanity saw through the lie and discovered the core truth. That's the whole purpose. And yet the excuse or occasion for the formation was undoubtedly some revelation from what one could call a divine being. A being who came from elsewhere, bringing down with him from a higher plane a certain knowledge and truth for the earth. All these beings have brought some truth. It may be an angle, it's an angle of vision. I mean, it's not the plenary supramental truth. Perfection is the first time that we see a divine being has tried to manifest. So perfection by its very nature is a totality. But otherwise it's a certain angle of vision. He came and suffered for his truth. But very few understood what he said. Few cared to find and hold to the truth for which he suffered. So we have that touching aphorism of Sri Aurobindo. He says, therefore, men are in love with suffering and sin. Therefore, Christ still hangs upon the cross. He came to liberate us. Same he says about Krishna. He came to give us freedom and delight. But men love suffering. They cannot imagine that one can live freely, beautifully, divinely, and delightfully. Playfully, they can turn life into a divine play. He came to teach us that. So therefore, still men are in love with suffering. And Christ came to show how to be free. He came to show us a path of freedom, compassion, all this. He came to redeem people of the burden of that original sin is basically to be born into the limitation of earth nature. It's sin in the sense you are prone to errors, you are prone to all kinds of ignorance by the very fact of being born in a body. And the touch of the divine, faith in the divine, is supposed to redeem you. But then men are in love with sins, so he still hangs upon the cross. Buddha retired from the world, sat down in meditation, and discovered a way out of earthly suffering and misery, out of all this illness and death and desire and sin and hunger. He saw a truth which he endeavored to express and communicate to the disciples and followers who gathered around him. But even before he was dead, his teachings had already begun to be twisted and distorted. It was only after his disappearance that Buddhism, as a full-fledged religion, reared its head, founded upon what the Buddha is supposed to have said and on the supposed significance of these reported sayings. So you see that how religions start. They will start with, oh, so-and-so had told this to me, personally communicated. Whereas actually it's all about the inner awakening, your inner contact, the great journey for which they have given us enough material. But soon too, because the disciples and the disciples' disciples could not agree on what the master had said or what he meant by his utterances, there grew up a host of sects and sub-sects in the body of the parent religion. A southern path, that is Heenyan, a northern path, Mahayana, a far eastern path, Theravada Buddhism. A northern path is the Theravada Buddhism, and this Mahayana. Each of them claiming to be the original, the undefiled doctrine of the Buddha. The same fate overtook the teaching of the Christ. That too came to be made in the same way into a set and organized religion. And when this religion is filled with political overtones, that's the time we are nearing, the deadline where God dies and man continues his life in his own way. It is often said, now here comes once again, Mother's sense of humor. It is often said that if Jesus came back, he would not be able to recognize what he taught in the forms that have been imposed on it. That's why very often when people talk about the second coming, often I have spoken about it, that Buddha spoke about second coming. Krishna spoke about second coming. Christ spoke about second coming. All the three spoke about this. But in Sri Aurobindo, very interestingly, you can see the three fulfilled. But the problem is you want the second coming in the same exactly way as the first coming took place. And that's where we commit a mistake. For all we know that when the second coming happens, he will probably have to do a lot of cleanup work of what people made out of him. And if Buddha were to come back and see what has been made of his teaching, he would immediately run back, discouraged, to Nirvana. We have that beautiful, interesting story of the mother where one of her friends who was a Buddhist, Alexandra David Neal, she had come to see her. And the mother remarked, Buddha is all about love. No, she would say. No love. It's about Nirvana. No, but he is here, full of love and compassion. No, he cannot be because he has gone into Nirvana. So mother laughs and laughs. And then the mother says that I saw him all the time standing and smiling by her side. But this lady would not recognize. Because he was a staunch Buddhist and Buddha cannot be anywhere near, he has to be in Nirvana. There cannot be love because love is a feeling. So how can Nirvana be compatible with love? So she says that he would run away discouraged to Nirvana. All religions have each the same story to tell. The occasion for its birth is the coming of a great teacher of the world. He comes and reveals and is the incarnation of a divine truth. To that extent, it is absolutely true. But men seize upon it, trade upon it. So that's why this urge to expand, either ideologically or through religion. This way you grow an empire. So you see people trade upon it, make an almost political organization out of it. And we need not speak about it. It's the most ugly side of religion. And it is everywhere in the world. The religion is equipped by them with a government and policy and laws, with its creeds and dogmas, its rules and regulations, its rites and ceremonies, all binding upon its adherents, all absolute and inviolable. And we should be very careful that any religion, we should not turn it into a set of completely external, ritualistic approach, because then we tend to lose the inner core of truth. The inner core must always be kept alive. This is the real thing. And leave human beings free to follow externally which way they want to approach it. Core is important. That gives the impetus, that gives the, like for instance, in Sanatana Dharma, what is the core? Often people ask, what is Hindu Dharma? So very simply, first, the core principle is first, Ekamev Dvitiyam. There is one without a second. There is one reality without a second. Call it Brahman, Parbrahman, call it by whatever name. Ekam Sad Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. The second, that this creation is an act of divine manifestation. This is the core. Eko Ham Bahushyam. One wanted to become many. So this is how the manifestation taken place. Man in his core is divine, but it is covered by ignorance. Call it Prakriti or whatever name one wants to call it. And man's true business is to remove this ignorance and discover his freedom in the infinite and the eternal. This is the core of Hindu Dharma, that man can unite with the divine. Now around that develops another doctrine which is about rebirth. Now rebirth is because the journey of undoing the covering and uniting with the divine is not a single lifetime journey. It's not a creed. It cannot be done just by a mere belief. It's a long process. So you need number of lives for this immortal soul to arrive at that. So there is the eternity of the immortality of the soul, which is part of Sanatana Dharma. This soul can unite with the divine, become one with it, because it's a portion of the divine. And that is man's true business in this world. So these are some of the core tenets. But other aspects, whether you are doing a Karwa Chauth Vrat or not, whether you have put a bindi or not, it's okay. You want to put it. Something nice, beautiful. But they have developed later on. Whether you are doing this fast or not doing that fast, these are very, very secondary aspects. Fortunately, there is nothing compulsory so far, at least in Sanatana Dharma. Nobody compels people to do this or don't do this. And many people do it for different reasons. I have heard people saying, I like to put bindi and sindoor because I look more beautiful with this. And well, nice, good. But there is no compulsion. The moment compulsion comes in any religion, that all must follow, like we see happening now in Afghanistan, for example, that girls cannot, do higher studies. Strangely, Saudi Arabia is removing the hijab in school. So you see, all over the world, this churning is going on. Whereas in Afghanistan, the girls now can no more go for university and college studies, not even with a burqa. So because whatever, that's a kind of compulsory thing. Now, in a way, it will help because it will bring from within the religion the urge to revolt, which probably, hopefully, will carry enough momentum and strength to remove the coverings. That's why all over the world this is taking place. Christianity is undergoing such a reformation long, long back, much longer. In Europe, almost most of the people have become secular or leftists because they're rationalists, because they've broken that through the shell. In Islam, this has started. In Iran, the girls want to connect with their original past, which is Vedic, if you look at it. So all over the world, this tendency to implode from within because of the hard, stifling pressure of outer laws and compulsions that is taking place. Like the state, it too administers rewards to the loyal. See the entire Islamic invasion. If you become a convert, you will be exempt from taxes. Whereas if you don't accept conversion, you will be taxed 30 times. So that was the jizya tax which was there. So it gives rewards to the loyal. And it was when Christian invasion took place in India, your properties could easily be attached. So there was such, you had no right over your properties. All binding upon its adherents. Like the state, it too administers rewards to the loyal and assigns punishments for those that revolt or go astray, for the heretic and the renegade. This is something which we in India may not be able to fully connect with because we have not gone through this. This is a stage of journey which largely Indian subcontinent has not gone through, because in Sanatana Dharma you keep evolving. There are always new avatars, new prophets, so you accept that there is an evolutionary mechanism. But there are religions which have gone through it. The first and principal article of these established and formal religions runs always, mine is the supreme, the only truth. All others are in falsehood or inferior. Of course, we have to remember not to do this even with Mother and Sri Aurobindo. We have to be loyal and faithful because we have the call. But if we start, the whole world should follow them, we are going to create a problem, because as the mother says, there are people who are not ready. Don't displace them. She even says that there are people who are happy in remaining where they are. Never try to convert, because they will lose that stability and balance, and they will start suffering because they are not ready for this kind of life. So it's so important. To each one, they have to discover from within the call. That's why Sri Aurobindo said it's the call for the path. Those who have the call have to remain faithful to the path. But there is nothing like conversion in this yoga. But in religions, what happens? Mine is the supreme, the only truth. All others are in falsehood or inferior. So contrary to what we have read in Sanatana Dharma, ekam sad vipra bahuda vadanti. The truth is one, but you can approach it from many paths and you call it by many names. And here it is, mine is the only one, the only name, the only way, the only path. Not only that, all others are in falsehood. It goes to that extent that if you don't accept it, you are regarded as a heretic and you can be punished. For without this fundamental dogma, established creedal religions could not have existed. Fear and favor. If you do not believe and proclaim that you alone possess the one or the highest truth, you will not be able to impress people and make them flock to you. So this is done often by miracles. Lure this worldly reward or other worldly reward. So most human beings are easily attracted to miracle healing, miracle gifts coming from heavens, or if not this worldly, this is the other worldly reward. So, but Sanatana Dharma is all about your karma. If you have a reward, you did something good in your previous life, whatever way it is understood. But here is by miracle. Nothing to do with Purusharth. Your miracle, just because you are an adherent, and you get a reward not only in here, but you get a reward in Dubai. I mean, heaven somewhere above. So you have a paradise hereafter. So this way, a common average man who is lazy, who doesn't want to make any effort, is lured. Because it's so easy that just because I change my name and surname, I can be rewarded. So she points it out, and then she says, this attitude is natural to the religious mind, but it is just that which makes religion stand in the way of the spiritual life. Spiritual life requires an infinite freedom and plasticity. The moment you reduce it to fixed dogma, you can do it for yourself. Each one must discipline oneself and has his own way, which also change with the stage of progress. I mean, I remember one phase when in the beginning as a youngster, I love to hear bhajan coming from any side. All kinds, even filmy songs, you saw in them a religious meaning. No? Very nice. You applied it to God. Then after some time it appeared crude. Then you go through a phase where all this even seems very strange. What is it, God? You are just trying to please him to get some reward. Then a phase came when Mother and Sri Aurobindo's bhajans, which are of a very different genre, thanks to Mohan Bhai and some of the people, they're of a very different quality. They are not like the traditional bhajans which we have heard. So it was so nice. I would love to put it in the morning as often, and you would love to meditate with the bhajan. In between, there is a phase when you would love to hear classical music and concentrate upon it. Then a phase came when that also dropped away, because now he is too close. Bhajan appears far. And then, you begin to call her name. Then the only thing you want to play around is Mother's music or Sunilda with Mother Savitri running in the background. That's at least where I am right now. I don't want to change that. Although when it stops, it's okay. But that is where I see the difference. So when people tell me, oh, that classical singer, how beautiful, just listen to it. Now I've heard about them, I've heard them. But now I can't connect. The same Abida Parveen, whose Sufi ghazal I would feel so much enthralled, does not give me that rapture now, because it has gone. So you have to keep on progressing. It requires a plasticity, it requires a wideness, and you grow into that. It becomes the divine becomes too close to everything appears, something is still outside. No, he is too intimate with you. So she says, the articles and dogmas of a religion are mind-made things, and if you cling to them and shut yourself up in a code of life made out for you, you do not know and cannot know the truth of the spirit that lies beyond all codes and dogmas, wide and large and free. Now she is, after setting the note alap, the power is coming. That if you want to shut yourself in limited formulas, forget about the spirit. It walks in infinite freedom. See how the divine catches an Arjuna, the least likely candidate from the holiness point of view. And where? On a battlefield. What a sense of humor. So this is how I heard a similar story about Christ, which was so touching. That there was a church which was made for the earlier people could go, but then one day one black had helped in building of the church, and he was told, no, now there is a different church for the blacks. So many sects have sprung up in all religions, by the way. So he was very distraught, and it seems Christ appeared, my son, why are you so unhappy? And he said, see, 5 years I worked for this place, and now they are asking me to go away, leave this place. So he says, don't worry, we are in good company. I left 5 years ago. They've asked you now. Because you can't fix divine into a formula. The moment you do that, and he doesn't care about, that's what in Sri Aurobindo's story Swapna, that Krishna comes to someone who says, if you, God, you come to me, I am going to give you I'll tie your hands and give you a nice bit beating. And Krishna appears, he says, you called me, and he says, no, I didn't mean it that way, because you think this is blasphemy. He says, no, I like it because you treated me like a living person and not like someone dead. That's why how well beautifully Sri Aurobindo said, always behave as if the mother is present, looking at you. That's called a living presence. So she says, when you stop at a religious creed and tie yourself in it, taking it for the only truth in the world, you stop the advance and widening of your inner soul. So it may be a step, for many perhaps it's a step, but very soon we must know that forever we are not meant to be in the kindergarten of the soul. But if you look at religion from another angle, it need not always be an obstacle to all men. If you regard it as one of the higher activities of humanity, and if you can see in it the aspirations of man without ignoring the imperfection of all man-made things, it may well be a kind of help for you to approach the spiritual life. So there are those, so what she is reminding us, Look at it only as the aspiration of man to connect with the divine through the divine personality. Discard the man-made things. They are imperfect. Don't start believing the Panda, the Purohit, the Maulvi, the Maulana, the Pope, the church. Don't get into that. Don't institutionalize it. Don't politicize it. But you follow the great teaching, and which is given to man by the divine personality who becomes the way, the door, and the path. That's what she is reminding us. Taking it up in a serious and honest spirit, you can try to find out what truth is there, what aspiration lies hidden in it, what divine inspiration has undergone transformation and deformation here by the human mind and a human organization. He's saying, see both. Keep the truth, liberate that truth, the kernel, and discard the other. You must see, don't make them as one. If you make them the institution and the divine personality around which it has come as one, you may do a great harm to yourself and, of course, to the widening soul of man. And with an appropriate mental stand, you can get religion even as it is, to throw some light on your way and to lend some support to your spiritual endeavor. So, namaste, goodbye to religion, welcome to spirituality. Let this new year. I often say that in India, it's time to say not a secular nor religious, but a spiritual country. So that's why I'm saying New Year greeting and wish. Goodbye to religions and ideologies, and welcome the widening spirit of man. Welcome spirituality. Welcome the new life. Welcome the divine life.